We talked about setting specific goals on here a while back, but actually making progress towards those goals can be an entirely different beast altogether. And it probably doesn't help when it feels like there are oh so many hours in the day, while you still have so much that you need to get done, both inside and outside of music. Trust me, I've been there. And sometimes I still am there. Well, today I'm going to share a principle with you that I heard long ago that has helped me immensely when it comes to being able to consistently make progress towards these big goals that I set for myself. And I'm also going to show you how you can apply the same for yourself. Let's do this. Welcome back to Three Strings Music, where we celebrate growth together, both in music and in life. My name is Clayton Roberts, though most people call me Dewey. Glad to have you here. I'd say today, but it's actually late at night as I'm filming this one. I'm trying to get some of these to be a little bit shorter than some of my earlier opinionated videos. And this seems like a good topic to play around with that because it's a very to the punch meat and potatoes kind of thing. And speaking of the meat and potatoes, let me help you get to the meat and potatoes of music in general with a free gift. If you haven't gotten it already, I have this guide that I put together called the 30-Minute Music Basics. It's just a PDF that I put together of definitions, bullet points, and just basic level 1 terms that you can use to get started with music. It's great for a kick in the pants if you're just looking for a little pocket guide to help get yourself started. And all the information in there you can learn in 30 minutes or less. And it's completely free as my gift to you. All you got to do is just go to threestringsmusic.com/basics to go download it. Again, that's the number 3, stringsmusic.com/basics. So to start, I will come completely clean and say that this is something that I have struggled with on many occasions, and sometimes I still do. When I work on projects that I know are going to be very time-consuming and take a lot out of me, it's very, very understandable to schedule things, but it's also very easy to get into the habit of thinking like you need to just block off a huge chunk of time in order to dedicate to just plowing through it. Be that I need to block off a week, I need to block off a few days, a few hours, whatever it calls for. This is something that is very, very normal. And you know what? Sometimes that is what the situation calls for, and doing that is the right move. However, I would advise not to let that be the standard for you. Life can get hectic, your schedule can get completely out of whack, and it takes very, very little to throw yourself completely off any kind of schedule that you set for yourself. Instead, let me introduce you to something that is called the 1% rule. So what is the 1% rule? Well, oftentimes, whenever we are envisioning big goals that are going to require a lot of stuff to do and have a lot of moving parts, we often think of things like how we need to chip off 30% at a time, 40% at a time, 50% at a time, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The idea remains the same. It's the whole principle of lopping off big chunks all at once so the whole thing looks less and less intimidating as it gets closer and closer to completion. There's nothing wrong with that. If it works for you, then do it. But what if I told you instead of imagining these huge big chunks like 30% and 40% and exhausting yourself in just a matter of days, why not just do 1% better every single day? Look at it as a daily thing, but you're also setting habits where every day you're making 1% of an improvement to whatever it is you're working on. And this can work for very specific goals like finishing a song, or more general of improving your solo capabilities on guitar. It doesn't really matter as long as whatever it is clearest to you. Make your aim of the game consistency, because in the long term, that will be absolutely game-changing to you, because you will form great habits along the way and not just things that will save you in a specific project. Because sure, that's not going to sound like a whole lot in the beginning, but it adds up over time. Think about it. There are 365 days in a year, and if you spend all 365 just doing 1% better, then that's 365% better. Sure, the actual math may be a little silly with that, but the same idea still applies. And I'm not here to tell you what that looks like. You know you better than I do. You know what you want better than I do. Think of it like if you're trying to get in shape, the aim of the game isn't to just go get a handful of really big and awesome workouts that just do everything right. No, instead, you want to build up that consistency and build those habits of little micro improvements as you go. running on a treadmill for 10 minutes, doing a set or two of crunches, push-ups, whatever it is. And even if it doesn't feel like a whole lot, that's okay because at least it's something. Even if you just do 10 push-ups in a day, that's still 10 push-ups better than doing none at all. Of course, that can apply to music as well. Say you want to improve your guitar skills as a lead guitarist. Well, if you dedicate just 5 minutes a day to just running through a couple of scales, then that's still better than doing nothing at all. Will that feel super productive and like you just climbed a mountain? No, probably not. But you know what? You took several steps closer towards where you want to go instead of just staying still. And to give a more specific example, right now I'm working on an album. And I know, unfortunately, there's just no way that I'm going to be able to get as much as I want done all at once. I can't dedicate a weekend to just slicing off half of the work that I need to do, and suddenly that's that. Believe me, I would have already done so if I could. And sure, there are some people out there who have schedules in their lives where they can do that. Unfortunately, I can't, so instead, I have to do something like make little tiny 1% improvements every single day as I work closer and closer towards finishing this album. It's the consistency that is the real game changer. With that album, it can just look like recording some of the guitar tracks for a song on one day, doing the bass of another song on another day, programming the drums the third day, like just whatever it is, writing lyrics, setting up the project. Yeah, even just setting up the project. That's so small, and it feels like, oh, that's so nothing to write home about. Well, it's more than not setting it up and doing nothing all day. You can blot out entire days to do this if you want to. I'm here to just say you don't have to. If you want days where you feel like you're making 5-10% progression, go for it. I'm just saying for those who feel like they are incapable of doing that, you don't have to and you never did have to. 1% every day will go a long, long way. And if it helps, there's another way to look at this. If you don't want to go with the 1% rule line of thinking, you can instead do a principle called don't break the chain. And I cannot believe it, but I first heard this on the Game Grumps. I still watch them every now and then when I can, but back in the day, I was a huge Grumps fan, and I loved Aaron, I loved Dan, and I especially loved the conversations that they would sometimes have as they played these games. And one of the episodes talked about the don't break the chain principle. I believe it was while Aaron was playing one of the Pokemon games, but Dan was talking about don't break the chain to him and introducing him to the idea. The idea is quite similar, just a little more visual, where every day you add a link to your chain, and over time your chain grows. And every day you add a link by doing something that works towards your goal. I believe the example that he used was wanting to be able to draw better. Well, every day, if you do at least just like a sketch, then that counts as a link that you add to your chain. But the goal is to never break the chain, as in, don't go a day without doing something. Don't go a day without adding some kind of link to your chain. Don't break the chain. Sticking with this artist example, maybe one day it's doing a sketch. Maybe one day it's learning a little bit about color theory. I don't know. I'm not an artist. It's just an example to get you thinking. Like, say your goal is involved in songwriting. Well, maybe every day you could just write 1 or 2 bars of music. It doesn't matter if it's amazing or not, as long as you made something. You added a link to the chain that has been growing over time. Just don't break your chain. And if this sounds like an enticing way to look at this, we'll take some time to get a piece of paper or in the Notes app of your phone, just little bullet points. What are links that you can make to add to your chain? To use an example, suppose you're wanting to improve your skills as a guitarist. Some little links that you can make: learning a new chord, learning a new scale, playing part of a song that you are working on, playing part of a song that you're trying to learn, trying out a new articulation that you just heard about. Hell, even just jamming along to a backing track for a few minutes. That would absolutely count in my books because, again, you're doing something. The links you make may be different depending on the day, but you're still making links to add to this chain, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The key is the consistency to not break the chain. So if either of these are sounding really nice and something you'd like to try for yourself, that's great. However, I would like to give you a pretty important warning. This is just something I think you should be very well aware of, but don't forget, life happens. And what I mean by that is just the ugly truth that there are going to be days where you don't feel like doing a damn thing. Be you tired, stressed, depressed, all of the above, and then some. I've had my share of those. I understand. When, not if, when days like that come around, you're going to do yourself a world of good by preparing for them now. And what I mean by that is to be prepared to just make smaller links for those days whenever they come. Your 1% or your don't break the chain, they don't have to be the exact same thing every day. In fact, I heavily recommend mixing it up anyways. But especially on days like that, prepare for them now and find out what you can do that is like your version of the bare minimum. In fact, I think it's a good idea to make 2 separate lists for this. One of those lists can be referring to what you view as a really good day. Basically just where you're really feeling it. You got good vibes, you feel motivated to work, and you feel like you can just pump out a bunch. Use those days to make bigger links. Use those days to maybe shoot for 2% or 3% or whatever you feel like. That's the easy list. The hard list is figuring out what you can do on days like I described earlier where you just don't feel it. Regardless of what your reason, if you are tired, if you're stressed, but you don't want to break that chain, you don't want to give up that 1%, just do something. Save your easiest to do tasks for days like that. That way you can still have those kind of days, and it's perfectly normal to have those kind of days, by the way, but you can still have them and still feel like you got something. You made some percentage of an improvement. You added some link to your chain. And then just spend the rest of that day resting. Please take this part very seriously. It's really easy to think about this stuff whenever you're feeling just fine and everything's all sunshine and rainbows, but when you have those days where it's the total opposite of that, that's when this really gets tested. So save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of heartbreak. Make these 2 lists now while you're thinking about it. Either way, as we wrap up, I hope I really gotten you thinking and even a little excited about these principles because they have saved me many times over the years in a variety of reasons. And yes, I do still work in chunks every now and then. I don't think I personally could ever completely eliminate that altogether, but it's still secondary. The 1% rule or don't break the chain, when you have that as your primary, you can go really, really far with the music goals that you set for yourself. The hard part is just making sure that it's consistent. So start thinking about which one of these 2 you'd like to implement for yourself or a combination of both. Get creative if you want. If you develop a system that I've never heard of out of this and it works for you, then hey, awesome. And regardless of which one you pick and what specific goals you try to apply it for, I'd like to end today with a good old quote for this. I love the Netflix show BoJack Horseman, and in it, there is a quote that is the last line of one of the seasons that is literally this principle. The non-spoiler version that I can give of it is BoJack running up a hill for the first time trying to get that first jog, and he's clearly out of shape, he's not having a good time, he's heavily panting, and he collapses on the ground. He's like staring up at the sun, and he's like breathing heavily, and he's like, oh God, this sucks. And the episode ends with another character hovering above him and saying these words. He stands over BoJack and says, "It gets easier. Every day it gets a little easier, but you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part. But it does get easier." And you know what? He's right. Thank you again for joining me on this one. I'm really curious to see how this will help you out, if you got some good stuff out of it, if you start applying it and it works for you, please, I'd love to hear it. If it's missing something, I'd love to hear it. Just let me know what your experience with this is. It would be really, really helpful to me, and also I'm just genuinely curious. And speaking of helping you out, don't forget the free guide I mentioned at the beginning of this video. You can go to 3stringsmusic.com/basics to get your copy of the 30-minute music basics. Great PDF. I'm actually very proud of it, and there's a lot of good stuff in there to help get you started. So just go to 3stringsmusic.com/basics to pick it up. One more time, that's the number 3, stringsmusic.com/basics. Thank you all again. I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you next week. Until then, have a wonderful day, stay safe, and stay consistent.